according to the program today, we have our day 2 event, and we will begin with the first session, which is for today. We will have a keynote, and a moderator will guide us. And the moderator for today, this first session, is Professor Frans Swanepoel, and I will read a short biography of Professor Frans Swanepoel. He is the Director of International Strategic Partnerships at the University of Pretoria in South Africa. And as a Senior Research Fellow at the Center for Advancement of Scholarship, Professor Swanepoel's research focuses on food systems transformation. He's the Director and PI of the Arua UKRIGCRF Food System Research Network for Africa, and a fellow / senior scholar of the UWA from Australia and Cornell from USA. He's also the inaugural fellow of the Pan-African Scientific Research Council. Ladies and gentlemen, our moderator for the session, Professor Frans Swanepoel. Welcome, sir.
It's my great pleasure to participate as a moderator in the session this afternoon. Our keynote speaker in this session is Dr. Fulufhelo Nelwamondo. He's an engineer by training who completed his PhD at Wits University. He did postdoctoral work as a fellow at Harvard University. He has done a lot of work and held executive positions at the CSIR in South Africa, served on the ministerial task team and advisory committees in Australia on the 4th Industrial Revolution, and was recently appointed as the CEO of the National Research Foundation. Anyway, back to Fulufhelo. He has a keen interest in developing human capacity, and specifically in terms of the role of the 4th Industrial Revolution, also making contributions to economic development, unemployment, and inequality. This is sort of his 100-word bio. What I fondly remember of Fulufhelo is that he was one of the 20 founding members of the South African Young Academy of Science. That was around 10 years ago or so, I think. I was involved in the selection of the first 20 founding members of the South African Young Academy, participated in the inauguration with the Deputy Minister for Science and Technology at that time present. And this is what I remember of Fulufhelo. It's the first time that I see him, I think, since that time, but really looking forward, and I'm very proud and happy to present Fulufhelo to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, the moderator, Prof. Swanepoel. Indeed, it has been a while. And let me also thank Dr. Osiru for inviting me to join this very important forum. The National Research Foundation is very privileged to be part of this growing science, technology, and innovation network in Africa. And when I was looking into this as part of my preparation for today, I realized that on the panel that's going to follow afterwards, there will be Professor Oyawa, and I wanted to use this platform to send my sincere congratulations to him for the election to the governing board of the International Science Council that happened late last month. Esteemed colleagues, in 2020, the global community abruptly entered a period of socio-economic decline that is unprecedented in so many ways. This decline, which was brought by COVID-19 pandemic, illustrates the need for societies to be resilient, to be agile, and to approach things differently in the face of the increasing global uncertainties and connectedness. One might actually argue very strongly that this period will hinder the progress towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. While the SDGs provide guidelines for addressing challenges faced by the modern society, Can I proceed?
Yes, you can proceed,
Okay.
sir.
I got some interaction, that's fine, no problem. I was just saying that while the SDG provide guidelines for addressing the challenges that are faced by the modern society, attaining these goals require very clear policies and implementation pathways. It requires structural changes. It requires strategic investments in research, innovation, and human capital that will optimize partnership across different spheres. The key to successfully attain this goal is understanding the dynamic interactions and trade-off amongst different goals to ensure that the progress that has been made in some areas is not made at the expense of the others. I must emphasize that this delicate balance is now not an option, but a necessity. The tough balance calls for a strategic focus on various interlinkages between the various aspects. It could be food, water, energy, land, resources, among many other nexuses that make these tough calls a center of our attention. I use the word balance, but I would like to emphasize here, moderator, that balance should not be read to say that these are equal on the scale. It's balance, but tilted in a particular way, and we need to then have proper weighting and understanding that these elements need to be considered thoroughly before we know which one we are putting on high priorities. In this regard, esteemed colleagues, funding agencies are at a crossroad of redefining, firstly, what we fund, how we conduct and communicate science to the broader society, and engaging in a debate on science-related matters of public interest, including developing tangible programs in response to the SDGs. In addition to acting as an innovation catalyst, research funding agencies and networks and programs such as the RSIF need to engage societies in order to demonstrate the value and benefits that scientific research provides, which in turn builds trust in science within the various systems. I will even predict, colleagues, that collaboration amongst funders will increasingly play a key role in the facilitation of effective planning to emergency response. I think COVID-19 has taught us these aspects, and I don't think we've ever had a lesson that is stronger than that. In this regard, we need to pivot on the existing structures and the networks. If one brings this to the regional perspective, we should all be aware that Africa boasts the youngest population, which is supposed to be our advantage. Yet, despite this comparative advantage, we're still contending with a multitude of challenges. And we have not taken full advantage of the science, technology, and innovation opportunities that can help us address some of these issues. In order for our continent to increase its competitiveness in the global knowledge economy, both the quality and the quantity of knowledge and innovation products has to be purposefully expanded. This has to be deliberate. This will require multifaceted and multi-layered approaches and increased strategic collaborations amongst our institutions, with our partners, of course. There's a need to create a global and perhaps regional strategies as well that go beyond the borders of our respective countries. And these strategies should allow us to share the development of knowledge and expertise. This is crucial to finding relevant, effective, and efficient solutions that will respond to our many challenges. We need a system to coordinate the interventions. In this regard, collaborations and partnerships must be anchored on a common understanding and mutual trust. And you can add issues of transparencies and others, but we need to be determined to effectively deliver on the outcomes. Part of the coordination should influence how and what we prioritize. As I've mentioned earlier, there's this delicate balance of looking at what then sits on top of this balance. And in my view, it's very important for us to also learn from the robust networks in the world. The SDG Global Forum of Funders as one, the Global Research Council, the Science Granting Council initiatives in Sub-Saharan Africa, the International Science Councils, and many other expanding and innovative networks. Moderator, let me give a few examples that I would like to share that are aligned with what the NRF's intent, the plans and the vision are for broad-based, highly strategic and directed STI partnership agenda in Africa. One key aspect in this regard is around skills development. Skills development is an essential prerequisite for sustainable development. I think it goes without saying that without the skills, all our dreams, we might as well just forget about them. Skills development is also fundamental to address the opportunities and challenges to meet the new demands of changing economies, new technologies in the context of the globalization. And perhaps one might even add in the context of the fourth industrial revolution, which perhaps the world has become quieter on since the onset of the pandemic. The NRF works closely with key stakeholders such as ministries and public universities in supporting many programs and interventions aimed at developing a skilled workforce on the continent. Annually, we award approximately 11,000 grants to students, including many from Africa. We also intend to grow these funding opportunities through strategic partnerships with like-minded organizations. Exposure of students to emerging researchers is another element that's very critical, and I'll just talk briefly about it. We see this as an integral component of developing a competitive and transformed representative research system. As the NRF, we are realigning new and existing support programs to offer mandatory opportunities for outstanding postgraduate students and postdoctoral fellows in South Africa to spend any period between 3 months and 18 months in the region and abroad. This is something that one might undermine, but anyone who will have been exposed to spending time outside of your normal space will emphasize the value that one gets through this exposure. And that's something that we are taking not lightly. As part of this program, a reciprocal hosting is included. So we host, you host on the other side, but it allows this kind of exchange. And a combination of global, regional, and international networks will provide an enabling opportunity framework for this program. That's something that's very, very important. The other element is around fostering collaboration between academia and industry. I think we have been socialized to believe that, academia and those who are in the industry, they're in the industry. But it's becoming evidently clear that fostering collaboration between academia and industry is vital in sustaining global competitiveness of any national system of innovation. Developing an effective program requires a co-creation approach with like-minded networks of universities, private sector, and public domains. In response to the need for increased impact, the NRF has developed an academia-industry partnership platform that's aimed at increasing the flow of information, knowledge, and resources between academia and industry, as well as enhance the development of new skills and research outcomes that have direct economic linkages. I have to emphasize this, moderator, that we have to look into what are these economic linkages. If I'm having a research outcome, how will it change the gains of societies? Given that we are looking at our respective systems with a lot of challenges, not enough funding, looking at unemployment rates, all issues that are raised within the SDGs. And we're saying, how do we then ensure that we can address those gaps deliberately so? The NRF is actively engaging the industry partners in developing innovating platforms to provide relevant skills to the students as part of their training. For example, recently, with SASOL in South Africa, the NRF started having this integrated energy and chemicals focus, where we're saying, how do we work together in a collaborative manner to address some of the gaps, which probably they have seen in the industrial side, and we are sitting with a cohort of students or researchers, and we are saying, how do we close this gap? How do we ensure that science becomes relevant? And accordingly, we have launched a series of collaborative research grants in science and engineering that will contribute to South Africa's energy transition and green economy. That's something that's very, very important. And if Africa as a whole were to think of it in the same form, and we have expanded kind of thinking across the continent, will never be the same. This initiative will also strengthen the collaboration between industry and academia within South Africa in order to enhance research capabilities and capacity. Partnerships are very important. Research excellence and innovation determine the wealth of nations, and it is the currency of Africa's future. I should repeat that. Research excellence and innovation is our currency as Africa. COVID-19 pandemic has reminded us that the challenges that the modern world face cut across borders and require effective collaboration in response. Considering the limited resources that we have from our governments, public funding agencies and other stakeholders need to design a collaborative research initiative that responds to societal needs. Otherwise, the society will be rising and saying, you are using our taxes to what end? What do we get when you fund research in a particular area? So we need to be very strategic in some of these issues. Partnerships further provide students and scientists with access to equipment and resources. It provides training and co-supervision, exposure to international research best practice, and a healthy exchange of ideas, skills, and knowledge that would not be otherwise possible without collaboration. Again, it requires us to be determined in saying, how do we collaborate and make these collaborations meaningful? Initiatives such as the Science Granting Council initiatives, which is a consortium of 16 African science granting councils, presents an innovative modality of partnership. And the NRF is proud to be one of these co-founders of this prominent program. The first phase of the SGCI's approach has focused on institutional capacity strengthening through joint programming co-created with a partner, SGC, across the continent. Investment in this program is now bringing tangible results, and this is very evident. Maybe some of the results, and I'm not going to give you full list here, is an increased number of innovative joint calls among science funders in Africa. For example, we had the COVID-19 Africa Rapid Grant Fund that supports 74 projects in 17 African countries. One other benefit or result that is evident is a shift towards multilateral funding among African funders. And the other one, the improved grants management system as a result of joint learning and sharing of information within our various countries. Increased engagement amongst councils and with stakeholders. And maybe lastly, strengthen capacities of SGCI participating councils. And these capacities allow us to promote the equality and the status of women in research, and equality, diversity, inclusivity, beyond even just gender equality. Dear colleagues, in conclusion, I would like to say the collective intersection of our common endeavors and our work that overlaps in multiple countries and regions, and our shared commitment of an inclusive, directed and informed higher education and research sector forms the basis of increasing our contribution to the SDGs. Through strategic partnerships, innovation in engagement, co-creation, and dedicated process funding collaboration, we will indeed be able to address our common challenges. The principle of these challenges to support an informed, excellent cohort of emerging researchers is key. It is also important that we develop a new system to coordinate the interventions, as I've mentioned earlier. And this has to be done in a manner that these collaborations and partnerships are anchored on a common understanding and mutual trust in order to effectively contribute to the SDGs. So let me thank you for allowing me to share these words for now. And I do hope that we will have a time to engage in some of these issues. Thank you, moderator, and back to you.
Yes, many thanks to you, Professor Nelwamondo. I'll try and read the African names, Nelwamondo, and also Professor Swanepoel for your remarks and the keynote, as well as your leadership in moderation for that session. And now we will proceed into the next session, which is the panel discussion. Apologies for that. Professor Swanepoel, are you still there with us?
Yes, I am here.
Perfect. I don't know if you have any comments following the keynote, a summary?
I don't think there's necessary for comments, just to thank Fulufhelo for a brilliant overview, and especially the emphasis that he has placed on partnerships to take us forward. I think in his words, it was research excellence, innovation are creators of wealth. I remember a couple of years ago, one of his predecessors at this NRF, Dr. Mogele, was always saying science and technology are creators of wealth. And I was immediately thinking of the advancement that science becomes research excellence and technology becomes innovation, which are creators of wealth. I think if I look at the time, we have a minute or two, if it's agreeable for one or two questions for Fulufhelo to respond to. I'm not sure whether that's appropriate. Would it be?
Yes, sir. It's okay. I'm looking at the Q&A and I don't see a question there, but one of the attendees has their hand up. Yes, and I think you can check there, Prof.
I cannot see any hands, unfortunately. I've seen one in the question and answer higher up earlier where they asked Dr. Fulufhelo to respond to how can industry be gainfully engaged in co-investment in research excellence in Africa. I think he did refer to that in his presentation, but Fulufhelo, maybe because we have 1 or 2 minutes, just in terms of a response to how industry can be gainfully engaged in co-investment of research excellence.
Thank you very much. That's a very good question, and I think it calls us to do things in a very novel way. The reason for this is that industry remains one of the biggest investors in research. If I just give you an example, and I'll use the African context. If you look at the total expenditure in R&D, I just want to get the video on. If you look at the gross expenditure in R&D, half of our expenditure comes from industry, and the other half is covered by government. So already industry is investing in R&D. How do we then ensure that they then direct these funding in a manner that will actually make sense. We have engaged some of them, and when you engage some of them, what you pick is that they will say, we can't give it to you because you are solving problems that are not relevant to us. So how can industry be engaged? I think it requires us to sit with industry and say, let's solve the same problems. Let's see how you can direct your money through us so that we can solve the problems that you have. But that's something that we are now starting to do, and we are realizing that one can then have a cross-pollination where research and industry is not seen as two separate things, where, you know, in academia they're solving these and in industry they're solving these. I use an example of our relationship with Sasol at the moment. It is for precisely that reason, where we are saying you can direct your resources through us and we can actually make a bigger impact. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that response, Fulufhelo. I think this brings us to the end of the session. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for everybody who participated. I see it was a highly successful session with more than 200 participants. Thank you, and looking forward to moving over into the panel now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Swanepoel, and another big thanks to you, Professor Nelwamondo.